On a warm summer day, July 3rd, 1962, in the city of Syracuse, New York, a boy was born who would one day become one of the most famous faces in the world. His name was Thomas Cruise Mapother IV. To the world, he would be known simply as Tom Cruise. But before the fame, the adoration, and the blockbuster stardom, Tom's life was defined by struggle, instability, and a restless search for belonging. His father, Thomas Cruise Mapother III, was an electrical engineer, a man with a brilliant technical mind but a harsh temperament. His mother, Mary Lee, was a special education teacher, warm and nurturing, someone who would later become Tom's anchor during turbulent years. Together, they raised 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son, with Tom as the only boy. From the beginning, life wasn't easy. The Cruise family lived modestly, often paycheck to paycheck. Tom's father, though intelligent, struggled to maintain steady work. His personality was domineering, and Tom would later describe him as a bully. In interviews, he spoke about his father's unpredictable nature, the way he could be affectionate one moment and cruel the next. These early memories shaped Tom's resilience, teaching him both caution and determination. By the time Tom was in grade school, it became clear he had a challenge that many misunderstood at the time: dyslexia. Letters seemed to dance on the page. Reading assignments that came easily to his classmates felt like impossible mountains for Tom. He would later recall how humiliating it was to be called upon in class, stumbling through words, trying desperately not to fall behind. Teachers sometimes assumed he wasn't trying hard enough, but in reality, he was struggling with something invisible. Still, even as academics proved difficult, Tom found other ways to shine. He was athletic, energetic, and curious. When he was young, the family began moving often, searching for work, searching for stability. Syracuse, Louisville, Cincinnati, Ottawa. The Cruise family seemed to pack up and leave every few years. By the time Tom reached high school, he had attended more than a dozen different schools. With each move, he had to start over. New friends, new teachers, new routines. For many children, this might have been crushing, but for Tom, it forged adaptability. He learned how to quickly read people, how to fit in when nothing felt secure. These were skills that would serve him well on stage and screen later in life. Despite the chaos, there was one constant in his life: his mother's support. Mary Lee encouraged him to dream, to keep going, even when life felt stacked against him. She nurtured his sense of creativity, taking him and his sisters to the movies whenever they could afford it. Sitting in the dark theater, young Tom would be mesmerized. The screen was a window to other worlds, other lives, places where he could escape his own struggles if only for 2 hours. But Tom's early dream wasn't to become an actor. In fact, as a teenager, he flirted with the idea of becoming a priest. For a time, he attended a Franciscan seminary in Cincinnati, considering a life in the church. But fate had other plans. He only lasted about a year in seminary before leaving. The discipline was strict, and though Tom respected it, there was a restless energy in him that longed for something else, something bigger. Back in high school, he began dabbling in theater. At first, it was almost by accident. A teacher encouraged him to audition for a school play, and Tom hesitated. Could he really stand on stage in front of everyone? Reading had always been his greatest weakness. But acting didn't require him to be himself. It allowed him to become someone else. When Tom stepped onto that stage for the first time, something clicked. The audience laughed, clapped, reacted, and for once, instead of feeling small or inadequate, Tom felt powerful. Acting gave him a sense of purpose. He wasn't the boy struggling to read. He was a character, alive in a story, commanding attention. From that moment, the seed was planted. Acting wasn't just a school activity, it was a lifeline. By his senior year, Tom had decided to give it a real chance. He wasn't from a wealthy family. He had no Hollywood connections. But what he had was drive. After graduation, he packed his few belongings and set his sights on New York City. He was barely 18 years old, carrying with him nothing but ambition and determination. New York in the late 1970s was a place of opportunity and danger, a city buzzing with culture but also known for its grit. For a young, aspiring actor like Tom Cruise, it was intimidating. He took odd jobs, janitorial work, restaurant shifts, anything to pay rent, while auditioning for roles. The rejection was constant, but Tom didn't quit. Each no was fuel for his determination. It was during this period that he shortened his name. Thomas Cruise Mapother IV was too long, too formal, too difficult for casting directors to remember. Tom Cruise was simpler, punchier, a name that could one day fit on a movie poster. His first steps into the acting world were small, auditions for commercials, tiny roles in theater productions. But in those small rooms, casting agents began to notice him. There was something about his intensity, the way he threw himself into every performance, that set him apart. He wasn't the tallest actor, nor the most conventionally imposing, but he had presence, raw, undeniable presence, and so, as the 1970s drew to a close, Tom Cruise stood on the threshold of a new life. The boy who had struggled with dyslexia, endured family turmoil, and drifted from school to school was about to step into Hollywood. The world didn't know it yet, but a legend was about to be born. The late 1970s had ended with Tom Cruise as a restless teenager in New York City, chasing a dream that seemed impossibly far away. But Tom was different from most young hopefuls arriving in the city. He wasn't content with simply auditioning here and there, waiting for something to happen. He was relentless, driven by a fire that few people could match. In the beginning, though, it was a grind. Tom worked odd jobs to pay for acting classes and survive in a city that had no sympathy for dreamers. He lived frugally, sometimes sharing cramped apartments, sometimes sleeping on the floor. But every day he practiced. Every day he auditioned. He was young, just 18, but he had something many others didn't, an almost frightening intensity. Casting directors noticed it right away. Even if he wasn't the most polished actor in the room, there was an energy about him, a kind of raw magnetism. It didn't take long before Tom got his first taste of the professional world. In 1981, he landed a tiny role in Franco Zeffirelli's film, Endless Love. He was only on screen for a few moments, playing a friend of the main character, but for Tom, it was everything. It was proof that he could make it onto a Hollywood set. For a kid from Syracuse with no connections, even a brief role was validation. Not long after, he appeared in Taps, 1981, a drama set at a military academy. This time the role was larger. Tom played a cadet, one of the rebellious students involved in a standoff. His performance was noticed, not just by audiences but by critics. Reviewers began to ask, who is this young actor with the fierce eyes? For the first time, Tom Cruise was on the industry's radar, but still, he wasn't a star. Not yet. The next year, 1983, proved pivotal. It was a year that changed everything. Tom appeared in The Outsiders, Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation of S.E. Hinton's beloved novel. The film was a gathering of young, up-and-coming actors. Patrick Swayze, Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, Matt Dillon, Ralph Macchio, a generation of talent that would soon dominate Hollywood. Among them was Tom Cruise, cast as Steve Randall. It wasn't the lead role, but it placed him alongside Hollywood's rising names. He was part of what became known as the Brat Pack, though he never fully identified with that group. To Cruise, The Outsiders was both an opportunity and a stepping stone. Still, there was something missing. Tom wasn't looking to blend into an ensemble. He wanted more. He wanted to lead. That chance came later in 1983 with a film called Risky Business. At first, it didn't seem like it would be a career-defining project. A teen comedy about a suburban boy left home alone by his parents. It sounded like light, forgettable fare, but the script had an edge. It wasn't just about laughs. It was about rebellion, temptation, and the blurred line between innocence and adulthood. The role of Joel Goodson required an actor who could play both naive and daring, awkward and confident. Dozens of young actors auditioned. But when Tom walked into the room, something clicked. He wasn't a household name yet, but he radiated that mix of vulnerability and intensity the filmmakers were searching for. He got the part. When Risky Business hit theaters in August 1983, everything changed. The film became a cultural phenomenon, and at its center was Tom Cruise. One scene in particular defined not only the movie but his career, the famous moment where Joel, home alone, slides across the floor in his socks, white shirt and sunglasses. lip-syncing to Bob Seger's old-time rock and roll. It was playful, spontaneous, unforgettable. That single image, Cruise in motion, grinning, confident, turned him into a star overnight. For audiences, Joel Goodson wasn't just a character. He was a symbol of youthful rebellion and coolness. And Tom Cruise, the actor behind him, suddenly had the world's attention. But Risky Business did more than launch Cruise's image as a teen idol. It proved he could carry a film on his own. The movie made money. Critics praised his performance and Hollywood studios took notice. Tom Cruise wasn't just another young face in the crowd anymore. He was leading man material. By the end of 1983, Cruise had appeared in several films, but it was Risky Business that cemented him as a breakout talent. Casting agents began circling. Directors wanted him. Audiences wanted more of him. And Tom himself felt it too. His life was no longer the grind of auditions and survival jobs. He was on the path to something much greater. Looking back later, Cruise would often say that this period was where his work ethic was forged. He never forgot the hunger of those years, the constant rejection, the long days of struggle, the risk of failure. Risky Business was his breakthrough, but he knew it was only the beginning. The 1980s were about to explode with opportunity, and Tom Cruise was ready to ride the wave. By the end of 1983, Tom Cruise had done the impossible. He had broken through the crowded pack of young actors and carved out a place for himself in Hollywood. Risky Business had given him his first taste of stardom. But what he didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that within just a few short years, he would go from being the new kid with potential to one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. The next step on that journey began quietly. After the success of Risky Business, Cruise was suddenly in demand. Scripts began to pour in and he had choices to make. For an actor in his early 20s, this was both a blessing and a risk. Choosing the wrong roles could stall his momentum. Choosing the right ones could cement his rise. In 1983, he filmed All the Right Moves, a small-town drama about a high school football player dreaming of escaping his working-class life. Cruise played Stefan Georgievich, a role that echoed his own ambitions. Someone hungry for something more, someone willing to fight for his place in the world. The film didn't become a blockbuster, but it showed Cruise's range. He wasn't just the charming boy from Risky Business. He could play gritty emotional roles too. Then came Legend, 1985, a fantasy epic directed by Ridley Scott. Cruise played Jack, a forest dweller battling darkness in a mythical world. The film was visually stunning, but performed poorly at the box office. For many actors, such a disappointment might have been a setback. But for Cruise, it was simply part of the journey. He had tested his versatility, experimented with genre, and prepared himself for something bigger. And that something bigger came in the form of Top Gun. When producer Jerry Bruckheimer and director Tony Scott began working on the project, they envisioned a high-octane film about U.S. Navy fighter pilots. It was meant to capture the speed, danger, and glamour of military aviation in a way audiences had never seen before. At the center of it all was the role of Pete Maverick Mitchell, a cocky, rebellious pilot with undeniable skill and a reckless streak. The role demanded a unique kind of actor, someone youthful but commanding, brash but likable. The list of possible stars included many young names of the era, but when Tom Cruise's name came up, something clicked. His intensity, his charisma, his ability to mix arrogance with vulnerability, it was everything Maverick needed. At first, Cruise wasn't convinced. A movie about fighter jets? Would audiences really care? That's when the Navy stepped in. To persuade him, they arranged for Cruise to ride in an actual F-14 Tomcat. The jet roared into the sky, pulling off stomach-churning maneuvers. When it landed, Cruise stumbled out, pale and shaken, but exhilarated. He reportedly ran straight to a payphone, called his agent, and said, "I'm in. I'm doing the movie." Filming Top Gun was intense. Much of the movie was shot on location at Naval Air Station Miramar in San Diego. The Navy cooperated heavily, lending aircraft and pilots. Cruise, ever the perfectionist, wanted to immerse himself in the role. He spent time with real fighter pilots, studying their attitudes, their language, their swagger. He even flew in jets to better understand what it felt like to push the limits of speed and gravity. the production wasn't without its challenges. Shooting aerial sequences was complicated, requiring precision and coordination. But Tony Scott's direction brought it all together. The result was a film that combined action, romance, music, and style in a way that felt utterly new. When Top Gun hit theaters in May 1986, it exploded. Audiences were electrified by the roaring jet engines, the adrenaline-filled dogfights, and the glossy style of Tony Scott's filmmaking. The soundtrack, featuring Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone and Berlin's Take My Breath Away, became just as iconic as the movie itself. At the center of it all was Tom Cruise. As Maverick, he was magnetic, cocky yet charming, reckless yet heroic. He wore the aviator sunglasses, he rode the motorcycle. He smiled that unmistakable grin, and suddenly every teenager wanted to be him. Recruitments for the U.S. Navy skyrocketed as young men lined up, inspired by the film. For Cruise, Top Gun was life-changing. He was no longer just a promising young actor. He was a bona fide movie star, a household name, an international icon. The film grossed more than $350 million worldwide, an astronomical figure for the time. And with it, Tom Cruise secured his place at the very top of Hollywood's A-list. But what made Top Gun so pivotal wasn't just its box office success. It was the way it defined Cruise's image. Maverick wasn't just a character. It became a persona that audiences associated with Tom himself. Bold, fearless, rebellious, but ultimately heroic. And from that point forward, Cruise's career would often revolve around that balance between daring action and emotional vulnerability. Yet Cruise wasn't content with being typecast. Even as Top Gun catapulted him to superstardom, he was already planning his next steps. He didn't want to be only the action guy or the teen heartthrob. He wanted longevity. He wanted respect. He wanted to prove that he wasn't just a flash in the pan. In interviews, he spoke about studying older actors, Paul Newman, Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, men who had built long, respected careers by taking risks and diversifying their roles. Cruise, even at 24, was thinking strategically. Top Gun had given him stardom. Now, he needed to use that momentum to become more than a star. He wanted to be an actor. The world had taken notice. Hollywood was watching closely. And Tom Cruise was just getting started. By the mid-1980s, Tom Cruise was riding higher than ever. Top Gun had turned him into a global superstar, his face plastered on magazine covers, his name whispered in every corner of Hollywood. But fame is a double-edged sword. With recognition came the danger of typecasting. Studios saw dollar signs. They wanted more cocky young heroes, more Maverick clones. Tom, however, had something else in mind. He didn't want to be remembered only for aviator sunglasses and motorcycle rides. He wanted to really act, to be taken seriously as more than just a movie star. And to do that, he needed to make smart choices. The Color of Money, 1986-1987. His first step toward credibility came through a master of cinema, Martin Scorsese. In 1986, Cruise was cast opposite Paul Newman in The Color of Money. The long-awaited sequel to The Hustler, Cruise played Vincent Lauria, a brash, cocky pool player mentored by Newman's aging hustler, Fast Eddie Felson. The role felt familiar on the surface, another young hotshot with swagger. But under Scorsese's direction, it demanded depth. Vincent wasn't just confident. He was insecure, reckless, desperate for approval. Working with Newman was a revelation for Cruise. Here was a screen legend, an actor whose presence was effortless, whose craft had been honed over decades. Cruise studied him closely. How he carried himself, how he delivered lines with subtlety, how he could command a scene with the smallest gesture. When the film released in 1986, Newman's performance earned him an Academy Award for Best Actor. Critics also took note of Cruise. Though he wasn't the star, he held his own opposite Newman and showed he had the chops to stand alongside the greats. It was a quiet but important step in his evolution. Rain Man, 1988. 2 years later, Cruise took another leap, this time into a film that would become one of the defining dramas of the decade. In Rain Man, 1988, directed by Barry Levinson, Cruise played Charlie Babbitt, a selfish, fast-talking car dealer who discovers his estranged brother Raymond, an autistic savant played by Dustin Hoffman, after the death of their father. At first, Charlie sees Raymond as nothing more than a nuisance standing between him and his inheritance. But over the course of the film, Charlie's journey becomes one of empathy, love, and transformation. Hoffman's portrayal of Raymond was widely praised, and he would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Actor. But Cruise's role was equally crucial. Charlie is the emotional anchor, the character who changes, who grows, who learns. Without Cruise's performance, the film would have lacked balance. Critics began to see Cruise differently after Rain Man. He wasn't just playing himself anymore. He was stretching, exploring complex emotions, showing audiences that he could dig deeper than surface charm. The film became a massive success, winning 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Cruise didn't get an Oscar nomination, but many critics noted that his work was underrated. His performance as Charlie was the glue that held the film together. For Cruise, Rain Man was another milestone. He was no longer just a star who sold tickets. He was part of films that won Oscars. His ambition to be respected as a serious actor was paying off. Born on the 4th of July, 1989. But the real turning point, the moment Cruise fully crossed into critical acclaim, came with Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July. The film told the true story of Ron Kovic, a patriotic young man who volunteers for the Vietnam War, is paralyzed in combat, and returns home to become a fierce anti-war activist. It was a story of idealism, disillusionment, pain, and redemption. For Cruise, taking on the role was a risk. Audiences had come to associate him with high energy, charm, and action. Playing Kovic meant transforming himself completely, physically, emotionally, even spiritually. He immersed himself in preparation. Cruise spent time with Kovic, listening to his experiences, studying his mannerisms, learning about life in a wheelchair. He wanted to get it right, not just for the sake of acting, but out of respect for the real man's journey. The transformation was astonishing. On screen, Cruise shed every trace of the confident maverick. As Kovic, he was raw, broken, vulnerable. The film charted his path from a wide-eyed teenager full of patriotic fervor to a disillusioned veteran racked with guilt and anger, to a man who found purpose in activism. Audiences and critics alike were stunned. This wasn't the Tom Cruise they thought they knew. This was something deeper, braver. The performance earned him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor and won him a Golden Globe. Born on the 4th of July wasn't just a career milestone. It was a statement. Cruise had proven beyond doubt that he wasn't just a Hollywood face. He was a serious actor capable of carrying one of the decade's most powerful dramas. The shift in perception by the end of the 1980s, Tom Cruise had done what many doubted he could. He had transitioned from a box office idol into a respected actor. In just 3 years, he had worked with Paul Newman, Dustin Hoffman, and Oliver Stone, 3 giants of cinema. His performances had shown range from cocky to vulnerable, selfish to compassionate, naive to broken. And with Born on the 4th of July, he had achieved the recognition he had been chasing all along. At only 27 years old, Tom Cruise was no longer just a star. He was a force, a rare combination of box office power and critical acclaim. Few actors in Hollywood history had managed such a balance so early in their careers. As the 1990s approached, Cruise stood at a crossroads. The boy from Syracuse who once struggled with dyslexia, who once drifted through more than a dozen schools, who once dreamed of being a priest, was now one of the most important actors in the world, and the best was yet to come. In 1992, Cruise joined an ensemble cast for A Few Good Men, directed by Rob Reiner and adapted from Aaron Sorkin's stage play. The role of Lieutenant Daniel Kaffee, a Navy lawyer defending 2 Marines accused of murder, allowed Cruise to channel both intelligence and fire. His courtroom battles against Jack Nicholson's Colonel Jessup culminated in one of the most iconic exchanges in movie history. "You can't handle the truth." Nicholson's volcanic performance earned the spotlight, but Cruise was the steady force that drove the story. The film became a critical and commercial hit, proving that Cruise could command prestige dramas as well as blockbusters. A year later, in The Firm, 1993, based on John Grisham's bestseller, Cruise played a brilliant young lawyer seduced and trapped by a corrupt firm. The film's tension, combined with Cruise's relentless intensity, solidified his reputation as the ultimate everyman hero, smart, ambitious, and willing to fight back against impossible odds. A Turn Toward Darkness, Cruise surprised audiences in 1994 with a role that seemed worlds away from his clean-cut image. In Neil Jordan's Interview with the Vampire, he played Lestat de Lioncourt, a seductive and dangerous vampire. Many fans doubted his casting at first. How could the all-American Cruise embody a gothic, aristocratic predator? But when the film premiered, Cruise silenced his critics. His performance was charismatic, chilling, and oddly sympathetic. Lestat was cruel, yes, but he was also playful and magnetic. The risk paid off, and Cruise once again proved his versatility. Show me the money. If one film defined Tom Cruise in the 1990s, it was Jerry Maguire, 1996. Written and directed by Cameron Crowe, the movie told the story of a sports agent who suffers a moral crisis and rebuilds his career from scratch. As Jerry, Cruise delivered one of his most human performances. Funny, flawed, passionate, and deeply emotional. The role allowed him to shed the action hero image and embrace vulnerability. His chemistry with Renee Zellweger gave audiences the unforgettable line, "You had me at hello." The film became a cultural phenomenon, earning Cruise another Oscar nomination for Best Actor and spawning catchphrases that remain part of pop culture to this day. More importantly, it cemented his status as not just a star, but a true leading man of substance. Mission accepted. That same year, Cruise made a bold move behind the camera. Partnering with his former agent Paula Wagner, he launched Cruise Wagner Productions and set out to build a franchise. His choice, Mission Impossible, 1996. Reimagining the classic TV series, Cruise not only starred as IMF agent Ethan Hunt, but also served as producer. Directed by Brian De Palma, the film combined espionage, stunts, and psychological tension. The now legendary sequence of Cruise suspended by wires, hovering inches above the ground in a high-security vault, became an instant cinematic icon. Mission Impossible was a massive success, proving that Cruise could not only lead, but also shape blockbuster franchises. More importantly, it gave him something every Hollywood actor craved: creative control, the risk of Magnolia. By the end of the decade, Cruise was one of the most bankable stars in the world. He could have coasted on action thrillers and feel-good dramas, but in 1999, he took one of the riskiest roles of his career. In Paul Thomas Anderson's ensemble drama Magnolia, Cruise played Frank T.J. Mackey, a misogynistic self-help guru who teaches men to dominate women. It was a role dripping with arrogance, toxicity, and pain. Beneath the bravado, Mackey was a man broken by childhood trauma. Cruise's performance was raw, furious, and unflinching. Audiences were stunned. This was not the polished hero they knew, but a man tearing himself open on screen. Critics hailed it as one of his finest performances, and the Academy rewarded him with another Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, Eyes Wide Shut. That same year, Cruise teamed up with legendary director Stanley Kubrick for Eyes Wide Shut. Acting alongside his then-wife Nicole Kidman, Cruise dove into a psychological exploration of marriage, desire, and secrecy. The film polarized critics, but its haunting imagery and intensity only deepened Cruise's reputation for choosing daring projects. The 90s legacy. By the time the decade ended, Tom Cruise had built a resume few could rival. He had tackled courtroom dramas, A Few Good Men, thrillers, The Firm, gothic fantasy, Interview with the Vampire, heartfelt romance, Jerry Maguire, blockbuster action, Mission Impossible, psychological drama, Eyes Wide Shut, and raw character study, Magnolia. He wasn't just a movie star. He was a chameleon, capable of transforming himself again and again, always taking risks, always pushing further. The 1980s had made him famous. The 1990s made him immortal. The new millennium began with Tom Cruise at the absolute peak of Hollywood power. He was not only a top actor, but also a producer shaping his own career. The decade started with Mission Impossible 2, 2000. Directed by John Woo, Stylized slow motion, explosive stunts, and Cruise's signature motorcycle duel helped cement Ethan Hunt as one of cinema's premier action heroes. The film broke box office records worldwide, but Cruise wasn't just repeating old formulas. In Vanilla Sky 2001, directed by Cameron Crowe, he took on a surreal philosophical story about dreams, love, and identity. Playing David Ames, a man caught between fantasy and reality, Cruise leaned into psychological complexity. The early 2000s also brought collaborations with auteurs. In Minority Report 2002, directed by Steven Spielberg, Cruise starred in a futuristic thriller about free will versus fate. In The Last Samurai 2003, he transformed into Captain Nathan Algren, a broken American soldier redeemed through Japanese honor and culture. The film earned him another Golden Globe nomination. Yet, as Cruise's professional triumphs continued, his personal life became a subject of intense media scrutiny. His split from Nicole Kidman in 2001 shocked fans. His outspoken devotion to Scientology drew headlines. And in 2005, while promoting War of the Worlds with Spielberg, Cruise's exuberant appearance on The Oprah Winfrey Show, leaping on a couch to declare his love for Katie Holmes, became a defining, controversial media moment. The backlash was swift. Once admired for his privacy and mystique, Cruise suddenly seemed overexposed. His confrontational comments about psychiatry and medication further inflamed public opinion. For a time, his reputation wavered, but through it all, his work never stopped delivering. He reunited with Michael Mann for Collateral, 2004, playing Vincent, a cold, ruthless hitman. It was one of his boldest performances, icy, chilling, a total departure from his heroic image. Many critics hailed it as one of the finest turns of his career. By the end of the decade, Cruise remained both celebrated and controversial. The movies proved his resilience. He wasn't going anywhere. As the 2010s opened, Tom Cruise was ready to reclaim his throne. The fourth installment in his signature franchise, Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol 2011, changed everything. Directed by Brad Bird, it included what would become one of the most iconic stunts in cinema history. Tom Cruise scaling the glass walls of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the tallest building in the world. Audiences gasped, critics applauded, and suddenly, Cruise wasn't a tabloid punchline anymore. He was an action legend. The success of Ghost Protocol re-energized his career. He experimented with sci-fi epics like Oblivion 2013 and Edge of Tomorrow 2014. The latter, co-starring Emily Blunt, blended time-loop storytelling with high-octane action. Though modest at first, it became a cult hit. Praised for Cruise's willingness to show vulnerability as well as strength. These years proved something vital. No matter the controversy, audiences still trusted Tom Cruise to deliver cinematic spectacle. By now, the Mission Impossible series had become more than a franchise. It was Cruise's personal proving ground. Each film brought new death-defying stunts, each one performed by the actor himself. In Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation 2015, Cruise clung to the side of an airplane as it took off. No stunt double, no trick shots, just Cruise and raw courage. In Mission Impossible: Fallout 2018, he performed a halo jump from 25,000 feet, piloted helicopters in combat sequences, and broke his ankle leaping across rooftops, yet continued filming. The film became one of the most acclaimed action movies of all time. Beyond Mission Impossible, Cruise kept testing his range. He revisited dark comedy with American Made 2017, playing a reckless pilot caught in CIA operations and drug smuggling. Audiences saw flashes of the risk-taking Cruise of old, willing to play morally ambiguous characters. As the 2010s drew to a close, Cruise had reinvented himself once again, not as the heartthrob of the 80s or the controversial figure of the 2000s, but as the ultimate action star, redefining what an actor could physically achieve on screen. The world shifted with the global pandemic in 2020. Movie theaters shut down. Productions halted and Hollywood's future looked uncertain. But Tom Cruise remained determined. He poured his energy into completing two massive projects, Mission Impossible 7 and a long-awaited sequel to his career-making film, When Top Gun Maverick finally premiered in 2022, it was more than just a movie release, it was a cultural event. Cruise reprised his role as Pete Maverick Mitchell, older, scarred, but still the fearless pilot audiences loved. The film blended nostalgia with new energy, featuring breathtaking aerial sequences filmed practically in fighter jets. Cruise insisted that his younger castmates undergo real aviation training, ensuring authenticity. The result was electrifying. Audiences flooded theaters. Critics hailed it as one of the best sequels ever made. Top Gun Maverick earned over $1.4 billion worldwide, revitalizing the box office after years of pandemic decline. Cruise, once again, was hailed as the savior of cinema. It was not just a triumph, it was vindication. At 60 years old, Cruise had proven that he could still command the screen like no one else. As the 2020s continue, Tom Cruise shows no signs of slowing down. His obsession with pushing limits remains intact. Mission: Impossible. Dead Reckoning Part 1, 2023 delivered yet another staggering stunt. Cruise riding a motorcycle off a cliff and parachuting into a canyon. Behind the scenes, Cruise remains deeply involved in production, shaping films not only as star but as architect. His work ethic, long hours, intense preparation, a refusal to accept good enough, continues to inspire colleagues. He has become more than just an actor. He is a brand, a symbol of cinematic commitment. While controversies linger, they are overshadowed by the sheer scale of his accomplishments. From the boy with dyslexia in Syracuse, to the breakout kid in Risky Business, to the action legend who scaled the world's tallest building and resurrected theaters with Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise has built one of the most remarkable careers in Hollywood history. And the story isn't over. Because if there's one thing certain about Tom Cruise, it's this: he will always find the next mountain to climb, the next jet to fly, the next impossible mission to accept.